Dear Chairman, dear colleagues, first of all, I have to congratulate ARIA and EUFOREA, namely Jean and Peter, for this excellent masterclass. I think you all will agree that we learned a lot today. And now I was discussing with Peter, we need to keep it simple. So not only biomarkers, precision medicine and whatever, we should have a look on the real world. And first of all, my disclosure. Because what we do in health research normally, and this is because most of us are scientists, we focus on biomedical research. This is wonderful. This is extremely nice. We need to know everything about interleukins and whatever. And then what we, or some of us also do, is clinical research. And this is also very good. We need good clinical trials, phase 1 to 3, control trials. But our patients, they really get advantage from healthcare research. And if we are able to bring this into this kind of research, so into the real world, then this is what really helps most of our patients, not only mice, not only patients in clinical trials, but the general patients, so our routine everyday patients. And the question is, if we go from basic research to clinical trials, is it really measuring what our patients want, what our patients need, and what we want to measure? And we have to say that, I don't know, working. What we use in clinical trials was a little bit disorganized until years ago. Oliver Farr and a group behind him were the one that brought in some more organization into it. And this is what we normally measure, or we should measure, depending on this EACI position, with regard to allergic rhinitis, sneezing, runny nose, obstruction, and of course the medication we use for it, and we create a symptom medication score out of it. Well, this is very good for clinical trials, for control trials. We need this, definitely. But our view on the world, our view on the patient, if we do so, is very much focused, and I would say it's pretty much limited, because this is how we look on the world. We see part of it, we see part of the problem of the patient, we see part of the patient, but we definitely do not see the real world. We don't see everything that's around the patient and that may be also important for the patient. So you all may know this cartoon, and it, in my mind, really says what we do in clinical research, because we may find the spear and we may measure the spear and we may do everything with the spear, but do we see the total elephant? Do we see everything, any problem that is behind it for the patient? I am questioning that. Because if we ask our patients what is important for you, and if we create instruments for real healthcare research, so for the real world, they tell us many, many different things that are important for them. I don't want to go through all of this, but it's not only my nose should itch less, my nose should run less, or whatever. It's much, much more. And if you can see here, 2/3 of the patients have ideas that are important for them, that are their needs, that are totally different on what we are measuring in our control trials. And for the patient, from the patient side, going to our community, going to our healthcare system, going to whoever is paying for the treatment, then there are other economically interesting things, and you can also see that here that allergic rhinitis is very important for our health economic systems. but we don't take this into our minds very often. So another question is the way we are measuring what we do in clinical trials really how the patient is living? And this is an example I got from Petra Ziegelmeier from the Vienna Challenge Chamber. This is how they do clinical trials in the Vienna Challenge Chamber. And you can see it's a very limited living. They have to say what kind of problems they had, what kind of symptoms they had. It's not really how the patients live in real life. And also our measuring instruments that we use to do provocation tests or whatever, lung function tests, is not really how patients live their routine lives. And the other thing is, if we go for biomarkers, then we take samples in any way. We take nasal secretion samples or whatever. And again, this is definitely not routine life. This would be much more routine life. This is a park study experiment. And here you can see this is going more into what we think would be real life. And here we are facing now problems that also the patients face during their real life experience. You can see that there are tremendous changes in symptoms, that there are tremendous changes in the pollen exposition, and that if we go for a chamber experiment, then we have a totally different situation. You can see this here. The pollen concentration in nature versus in such a pollen chamber is totally different, and the symptoms are totally different. So the symptoms are changing much more if we go for real life. So what does this all mean for our therapy, for our therapeutic approaches? Again, what patients want from us is not, I want to have a less itchy nose. Many of them at least want to be cured. Of course, symptoms should go down, but many other expectations are there from patients. And if we take this into a real world treatment, then we are facing several problems. We are facing problems of how to organize our treatment, what kind of medications should be used, and several other aspects. So going into the real world means the patient needs and suffers for a very simple treatment. He don't want to be asked, come on, tell me what endotype are you in? What is your IL-5 level in nasal secretions? The patient wants a simple treatment, he wants a sufficient treatment, and he wants to handle his treatment more or less by itself. So far, it is not what we are doing, at least what was given here in these trials. There is a special type of disorganizement in our treatment, so this is really what we should change, because it means that the patients do not follow us. They do not follow our advice, they do not follow what we tell them, how the treatment should be. And we know that in several situations in real life, also in clinical trials, but especially in real life, we have a non-compliance of the patients. So going for our therapeutic principles, we have allergen avoidance, we have symptomatic therapy, and we have specific immunotherapy. And how can we deal with this in real life? Well, first, going to allergen avoidance, at least if we use it alone in a mild allergic patient, we are not able to measure a statistically significant effect. So how should the patient follow our advice to do so if he does not experience a real difference between before and after? So we can really say this is not the right way to go. Keeping it simple, again, is very important to what we should tell our patients and to make the patients follow us. So then the next is symptomatic therapy. And I don't know what's happening here. And what we normally tell our patient, because this is coming from our clinical trials, is use this medication continuously. Use it when you know the season is starting, or you have any other treatment, continuously for at least a couple of weeks or the entire season. But this is not happening, and this is not, the patient is not following it, mainly because they don't want to take medication all day, and because they have breakthrough symptoms. So even if they take the medication, they will experience symptoms, as you can see here, and a lot of patients are doing so, and a lot of patients are experiencing symptoms. So what the patient is doing, and I can understand this, and I think we all can understand it, is looking for other solutions, or is looking for another way of using his treatment. And one of the experience we see from each and every real life study in allergic rhinitis is patients looking for co-medication. So they don't use just one medication, and the one you advising him to take it continuously, they use it on demand, and they use other medications in combination with what you were giving him. It is a good treatment for the patient if the medication he's taking is providing rapid symptom relief and rapid reduction of symptoms. And then, as you can see, the patient is switching from one to another treatment depending on what the patient is experiencing, and if it helps him, he will follow it. Otherwise, he will look for another kind of treatment. So this switching and different kind of treatments, so polypharmacy, this is the situation we are facing in real life. This is really what we are dealing with, and this is the situation that makes it different from what we experience in clinical trials. So where do we know this all from? We know it from this organization here, from ARIA, and this is a problem. Jean Bousquet has shown you his data, he has shown you his ideas, and I think it really makes a difference on treatment of patients in the future. It even makes it right now, because this allergy diarrhea, the McVia diary, but everything behind it, this is really the way we should go for treating patients in real life. We learned a lot out of this data, even right now. We learned what is different in real life in comparison to our clinical trials. But it can also be the link between clinical trials and the real world to change the now not optimum treatment of our patients. So here we can see that the continuously treatment that we advise our patient now can be changed into an on-demand treatment if necessary, and we should at least debate on it, because this is the real situation. You can see here again data showing pollen counts and symptoms, and as you can see here, with such large differences in the symptoms, it will be necessary, and the patient will do it anyhow, to follow his situation, and this can be done with the monitoring of such an app. Coming to allergen immunotherapy, you have heard a lot, and I think you believe me that it is a very good treatment. We all agree on this, and just again, one of the most important recent studies on SLIT in mild allergic asthma. But the question is, when should we give such a treatment that is, of course, not cheap to the patient? So when to initiate allergen immunotherapy? Should we do it if nothing else works? If we've done everything else? So this would be the classical late intervention that we did in the past. Try anything else first and then go for immunotherapy. Well, one of the most important reasons why we did so is, of course, an economically oriented approach. We now know today that this may not be true, and this may not even save money. Just an example for one study that has shown this. These are German data. And here the guys from Hamburg have examined the cost effectiveness of immunotherapy with regard to an early treatment or a late treatment. And the good finding was that immunotherapy in general has an excellent cost effectiveness in allergic rhinitis. We have heard this before, but again, this study was showing it. But coming to cost effectiveness of different approaches of how to treat, you can see here the early intervention and the late intervention. And if you go for a late intervention where you wait until the patient has several other problems, several other interventions, several other medications, then you have in the end much higher costs for immunotherapy than with an early interventing approach. The other question is co-medication. Again, this was brought to you by Marek earlier. We know that immunotherapy is saving co-medication, so this again adds to the cost effectiveness of the treatment, and this is another example for this. But we achieve this on the long run, not with the treatments we see from clinical trials, so the 6 months, 1 year, 3 years treatment. Sometimes we need longer treatment periods, and we need to convince our patients in routine to have treatment periods of 3 years or even more. And this has been examined by this very nice trial, looking for the combination of the duration of immunotherapy with regard to treatment efficacy. And as you can see here, the 4 years treatment period was optimum, and we had an increase from 4 to 3 years, but no further increase in 5 years. Another study doing this in children, again, showed that there is an optimum treatment period, as we can see here, that we should follow. But the question is, again, how is this compared to real life? The adherence of patients, here shown with sublingual immunotherapy during such 4 years, we would need to get this wonderful data, is very poor. And as you can see here, only a third of the patients that beginning immunotherapy under real life conditions are really where we want them on therapy after such a period of 4 years. Again, comparison of subcutaneous and sublingual immunotherapy, a pretty similar picture. the adherence of patients to the treatment is going down over time. This is real life, not what we see in clinical trials. We really have to bring here our real life experience to what we know from the studies. And how can we manage to do so? Again, John is telling us, because the ARIA app is not only something that can, where patients can communicate, they are also getting motivated. They are documenting their medication, and according to our experience, this really brings people to therapy, but it also keeps them on therapy and is really increasing the adherence to different immunotherapy schedules. So this is what you heard before. I really think that bringing real world to the patient, that bringing our experience from whatever we do in basic research, whatever we do in clinical trials, to the real world patient, these new ARIA approaches can help. And it can help because they are not only wonderful tools on the side of the patient, but they can also combine the different healthcare providers, from the pharmacist to the general practitioner to allergologist, ENTs, and whatever, and have a common approach to treating these patients. This also will go into the guidelines. We had in the past guidelines where we
1 minute, please.
Where we had data from clinical trials. Now it's changing, and we're taking the real world into our guidelines. And again, this is in many information we have due to the MASK app. Adherence to treatment can improve. The mHealth approach is very important, and this is bringing me to an invitation of EACI to bring all you to the region south of London, where we're going to have our European rhinology meeting, where we discuss all around allergic rhinitis, nasal polyps, and so on. And now I'm ready for questions. Thank you.